Now that we have finished the tempering cycles on our knife, it is metallurgically complete. There's nothing further we're going to do to influence or change the internal structure of the steel. From this point, there's still a lot of work to do, from putting an edge on it to putting a handle on it, all these things to make it a usable tool. But before we even get that far, we still have to finish the surface of the blade and bring out the pattern we've worked so hard to put into it. Grinding a blade is a skill all on its own, and it can take years to learn. My preferred method is freehand grinding, but if you're using a jig or something to assist you with this process, the end result is the same. The flat grind that I'm doing on this blade is comprised of an angle on each side of the blade that taper from what's going to be the edge all the way up to the spine. Our goal is to have two flat planes, one on each side of the knife. The blade is now finished ground. That means we've completed the geometry of the blade except for the primary edge that actually cuts, which we will do towards the very end of this process. The next thing we need to do is work on bringing out that pattern. So we need to bring the blade, the sides of the blade, up to a high finish, and we do this with sandpaper. Once we do that, then we can use ferric chloride, a type of acid, to etch the steel. This is where combining the two types of steel that we've used is revealed, in that what we've done to the steel so far is going to be displayed because the nickel content steel is going to resist that acid, while the carbon steel is going to etch, and more of that is going to be removed. Now that I have the blade sanded to a high grit and ready for the etch, we can see how we did with the forge welds from the very beginning of this project. You shouldn't be able to see any distinguishable difference between the layers of the steel in this blade. In fact, it should basically look like a mono steel blade at first glance. In some cases, upon close inspection, you can tell the difference in the layers simply the way that the nickel steel catches the light in a slightly different manner. But when it comes to any lines, cracks, voids, or anything like that, there should be no appearance of a forge welded blade. How long you etch your blade, or how long you leave it in the acid, and how many times you put it in there really depends on how deep of an etch you want and the condition of your acid. Temperature can also play into it slightly as well. With a fresh solution of ferric chloride, a couple, maybe 3 times in the etchant, about 10-15 minutes each, can get you a nice deep etch. If you have too strong a solution of the ferric chloride, you'll get a poor etch. That's because the acid is too strong and it's etching both steels closer to an equal amount. It actually works much better if you dilute it out to, say, 3 parts water and 1 part acid if you're using the pre-mixed solution. This weaker solution will still etch the carbon steel while being able to leave the nickel steel alone, and that's going to give you the best results. Also, keeping the steel clean throughout etching is also important, because oxides will build up on the steel, which will slow the etching process and at times muddy it or make it less crisp. I want to put a handle on this that's not going to detract from the blade, but instead complement it. And since it is a functional, usable tool, it needs to be something that's durable and long-lasting. Ironwood, or desert ironwood, is one of my favorite handle materials for that reason. It has a lot of character on its own, so it's got that additional beauty to the overall finished project, and it complements the blade. Damascus knives were sort of reintroduced into the knife world in the 1970s by Bill Moran, one of the co-founders of the American Bladesmith Society. Since then, the pattern welded or Damascus steel blade has become extremely popular and very widespread. As with anything that is widely popular, imposters or counterfeits come on the scene pretty readily, and so you can buy Damascus steel knives for very cheap. But as with anything else, the buyer must beware, because the origins of many of these blades are rather dubious. That's why buying from a craftsman that you can interact with on some level, or see their work or their process, is really a good idea when it comes to purchasing a Damascus knife like this. Completing a Damascus steel knife like this, for me as a craftsman, is satisfying primarily because of the process involved, the actual building of it, understanding the process, the materials, the way in which you work the material, the tools, all that kind of thing. The finished project has intrinsic value, but I would say that value is more for the person that I made it for, and the most satisfaction I get is from the actual making of that. Our finished knife is a combination of beauty and functionality, and that's the goal that we started out with in the first place. While it could be considered an art piece in some sense, it's also a fully functional blade, a fully functional knife, and to me that's an important thing.